Hi everyone, how's things? I hope you're doing all right. It's Dave here. Thanks for coming along to another episode of Legends of the Spire. On the podcast this week, I spoke to Jack Broadhead. Now, Jack was a youth player at Chesterfield from about 2011 and then was at the club until 2015. Got a very unprecedented 3-year contract after his spell in the youth team. And the centre-back did go on to have a few appearances for the first team, also having some loans as well around his seasons at the club too. It was obviously a really interesting time to be a Chesterfield player. We had both the tail end of the John Sheridan era and the Paul Cook era too, so there was promotions and the League One playoffs and paint trophy finals and things like that all happening around then. So great to get Jack's perspective on the players that he was training with at the time and kind of what was happening at the club over those few years where he was with us. He's gone to have a really good career in the non-league since leaving us and also studied for a degree as well. So he's currently full-time at Worksop, both as a player and as their development officer too. It looks like he's going to have a great career in the game, currently doing his coaching badges as well. So we wish Jack all the very best in the future, and it was really great to have him on. As always, we are at Spire Legends on Twitter, Legends of the Spire on Facebook, and you can find us on Instagram as Spire Legends 2 now as well. Do keep an eye out as we have some rather special merch coming up over the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for that. But in the meantime, here we are with the latest episode of Legends of the Spire with Jack Broadhead.
Legends of the Spire.
It was quite an interesting time to be a Chesterfield around that squad, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It
A
was
lot happened.
Yeah, a lot happened in that time. It was sort of very eventful time for the club. I think it was. You look at sort of the rise from sort of when I got there. John Sheridan had just taken over the in league, or John Sheridan was in charge, and they'd just been promoted to League One. Sort of the youth team coach, Dave Bentley, was like, look, it's a great place to be. And we had a meeting with all the parents and stuff. And he was just saying, like, even the groundsman was won like groundsman of the year and stuff like that. So it was seemed like a place like really on the up, obviously the stadium as well. So yeah, it was brilliant.
Am I right in saying that you're from Mansfield?
I am from Mansfield, yeah. Born and raised in Mansfield.
Did you get any stick joining joining Chesterfield when you're from Mansfield or not?
Not really. I mean, it's like I say, it's obviously a massive rivalry, and sort of when I was growing up, I was sort of went to like training days at Mansfield and stuff, and nearly joined their academy on a few occasions when I was younger. But it was just weird the way that I got into the academy at Chesterfield was I was actually playing for Nottinghamshire boys, like the county team, and we played against Chesterfield, like their academy under 16s, I think it was, and that's the way I got into it. I had a really good game, and the youth team manager Dave Bentley saw me and wanted to sign me there and give me a scholarship there and then. So yeah, that was the way that I got into it. But in terms of sort of living from Mansfield and stuff like that, I never got any mentions or anything by the fans or anything like that. So nothing that I heard anyway.
I think there's so many players that seem to have moved between the two over the years that, although it's such a massive rivalry, having players moving across, it's not unusual, is it?
No, I mean, probably the most high profile was Sam Clucas, weren't it? So that was quite a big one. Sam was quite a pivotal player for Mansfield. I went to watch him a few times at Mansfield, and yeah, he was probably their best player. We took him, and it was, at the time, it was sort of a massive deal, weren't it? But and I think he played for Lincoln before that as well. So I think Lincoln to Mansfield and then on to Chesterfield. It was he probably had a lot more of a rough time than whatever I could even imagined of having. But yeah.
Were you always a defender, even kind of growing up, or did you move around the pitch a bit?
It was a bit. I sort of played wherever I wanted, really, in terms of like not Sunday league, but like grassroots level. And I was sort of always quite big, quite strong, quite fast. So that always got me, sort of allowed me to play wherever I play. I mean, I played up front, at the back, midfield. So it was all over the pitch really. Sort of when I first signed for Chesterfield, I was more of a midfielder. But it was actually Dave Bentley, who was the youth team coach, who said, look, we're going to play you. We haven't got any centre-halves that we're taking on, so we're going to play you centre-half, obviously because of your size. So I was like, right, okay, whatever. And never really looked back. And it wasn't until I dropped back into non-league that I started playing in midfield again. I think you look at sort of in non-league, the ball, sort of the midfield, the role of the midfielder is a lot different. It's not, especially sort of 5-6 years ago, it was more, bad pitches. So the ball wasn't on the ground a lot more. So I was able to utilise sort of my height and my physical abilities to sort of dominate games in midfield. So that's how I sort of got playing in midfield when I dropped into non-league. And it's just sort of carried on. I've sort of flitted between centre-half and midfield throughout my time in non-league. I mean, I've played at sort of various levels, Conference North of Boston, I played in midfield. But then in the Northern Premier with Grantham a few years ago, I was playing centre half. So it just, I think it depends on the manager as well, and the team around you, and it's just versatile. So that's something that I can use to my advantage. Versatile player. I mean, non-league, the standard's really good. It's tough. It's relentless. I mean, there's no pauses in the game. It's really, really tough. And you sort of see, like, even I'm playing at Worksop now, which is step 4. So it's the lowest step I've played in non-league, but there's some brilliant teams in our league, absolutely class teams, and some players that are playing in that league that I think, given the right, especially at Worksop now, I've got a few players that, given the right sort of coaching and the right sort of grounding, if you like, they could easily go on to progress into professional clubs without a doubt. It's just the case of there's that many players now who are good enough. It's just being in the right place at the right time and being lucky enough to get spotted and take your chance. That's how it is. It's very competitive, and I was looking back when I first dropped into non-league, my aspirations to sort of get back and potentially get into a full-time club somewhere. And I came close, obviously, with Boston. We was probably a season off being full-time. I think if my time had gone a bit better at Boston, we would have gone full-time like they are now. But there's so many talented kids that just, for whatever reason, haven't made the mark in the professional game, and they've dropped into non-league and flourished. And you're going to, I really do think in the future you're going to see a lot of teams, your lower, like League 2, League 1 teams, looking for players in non-league to go and sort of fill their ranks and potentially go from squad players to first team players. I think Jake Beasley, he's a great example. Obviously played at Chesterfield. I was in the youth. Well, he actually played an age group above himself in the youth team at Chesterfield. So I played with him in the youth team, but he dropped out into non-league. Obviously in the conference, I think it was Solihull Moors, and he's got his move back into the league now with Rochdale, and he's flying. I think he scored 2 goals at the weekend, and you look at players like Loz Maguire as well, current first teamer at Chesterfield, who was in the youth team with, who obviously will have had opportunities when Chesterfield dropped into non-league to go into the league, and to be such a relatively young player to have played that many times for Chesterfield's first team, he's going to have opportunities to go and play. And it's obviously they're 2 great examples, but there's hundreds of them in non-league, and it's really for professional clubs.
Yeah, and there's so many Chesterfield players now that look at George Carline and Asante and people like that. They've not had illustrious league careers, and you kind of think, why not? It's really interesting in the last year how we've had a lot of players that have come from further down the pyramid, and you think actually these are really good players and a lot better than some that we've had in previous years.
I mean, some of the leagues, so obviously step 4, they don't have Northern Premier Eastern League at the minute, and if you take if you handpicked the better players from each team and sort of made like a league squad, if you like, that it'd be a very competitive team. And there's a lot of players that have got experience with higher up the league, and you can't disrespect non-league at all. It's tough. The lads, myself included, we work full-time jobs, and then you're training Tuesday, Thursday until sort of 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and then a game on a Saturday, normally a game on a Tuesday. So it is really, really demanding, and you've got to be physically fit and mentally really tough to pursue a career in non-league. Again, you see players drop down and from professional clubs, and they think it's going to be easy, and they think that they're going to get straight back up. But the one thing is, your fitness isn't the same, because you go from training every day to training maybe twice a week. So then you've got to look at yourself and think, well, and this was my mistake when I dropped into non-league, because I just assumed I'd stay at the same fitness level, and my fitness levels dropped dramatically because I wasn't taking care. I was still, eating rubbish and doing this, but I wasn't training. So my fitness levels weren't improving at all. So I had to take into account sort of my diet, training, like taking myself away from the game and training on my own, hiring personal trainers. You've got to have the right mindset to sort of recognise that although it's not professional level, you're not training every day, you do need to sort of maintain your fitness levels, because obviously they drop dramatically.
If we take you back to kind of youth career at Chesterfield, so when actually did you join us into that youth team?
It would have been 2011, I think, 2011, 2012. It was the first. I think it was the first season or the second season at the B2 Net, as it was then.
Yeah, second. Yeah.
Obviously, it was John Sheridan manager, Tommy Wright, Mark Crosley, and like I say, there was when I first came into the club, there was a real buzz around the place. Everyone was raving. They'd just gone up from League 2 to League 1. They had I think Craig. Who did they have? They obviously had Tommy Lee, Danny Whittaker, Mark Hallett, sort of these brilliant players. And obviously, when I first went into the youth team, we actually did a training session with the first team. Obviously, had Jack Lester, and I can remember marking Jack Lester and thinking, "This is a joke." Because without disrespect, he was coming towards the end of his career. He was sort of this legendary striker around Chesterfield. I've got a few friends that are Chesterfield fans, so when I told them that I'd marked Jack Lester in training, they couldn't believe it. But you sort of look at me and think, well, I'm a young lad. I should be able to. I should be faster than him. I should. And honestly, he was spinning balls in behind, beating me in races, beating me in the air, and all. He just absolutely bullied me. And I just thought, wow, this is a different level. I've got to book up my ideas here. Looking back, I was only 17. I was a young lad, but I thought, this is ridiculous. How much I've got to work here and how much I've got to improve, because he just made me look like a 5-year-old there.
So he was probably old enough to be your dad, wasn't he? Nearly. He'd have been about 36 then, would he? 35?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how old he was, but I certainly thought in the back of my mind, I should be physically better than him, but he was just absolutely dominant. His movement was a joke, and to be fair, he was bordering on like, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough here. There's no way I'm going to be good enough to deal with this week in, week out. And it was, it was really eye-opening. And like I say, Jack Lester, obviously, is legendary striker, played ridiculous level. And looking back now, he probably should have been embarrassed if he didn't bully me. But yeah, it was really eye-opening. And like I say, that time, they had a really good team. And they were sort of hopeful for that season in League One. I think it's a bit of a disappointing season, although they won the Johnson's Paint, I think.
Yeah.
Obviously, they got relegated again. I can remember it was like a weird season, because I can remember like doing the ball boys and like obviously all the youth team had to be the ball boys around the pitch, and I can remember watching games and we played really good football, and we kept the ball quite well, but it was just like we'd dominate half an hour, and then the other team would score 2 goals before half time. And it'd be like, well, that's just, it was just such a strange time. And I think a lot of the Chesterfield fans got a bit disheartened in that time. Potentially should have, strengthened looking back now, because I know we lost a few players, and obviously that when you're taking the step up from League 1 to League 2 and you lose some of your best players, it's sort of, you need to sort of improve your squad. And you don't need to be going backwards, you need to go forwards. And I think probably the squad, the whole dynamic, from what I can gather and from talking to players at that time who were in the first team at that time, was sort of what they understood was that, there was a bit of frustration where maybe John Sheridan wanted to improve the team and he wasn't given the opportunity to and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a weird season. For me on a personal level though, sort of.
I was going to say you got youth player of the year, didn't you, that season?
Yeah, I had a really good season that year. Well, it was I just got thrown at the deep end really, because it was, as a first year, you're looking back and you have your first year scholarship, you have your second year scholarship, and the idea is for the first years, who are a year younger than the second years, to sort of go in and fill the gaps when needed in the team.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately for me, there was quite a few injuries at the time, and that led to me I played every single game in my first year, which was unheard of. I don't think it had been done before. And I actually played reasonably well. I can remember I had a few nervous games sort of when I first got into the team, but sort of grew into it gradually. And by the end of the season, I was sort of a guaranteed starter, if you like. I was always going to play, even if the second years were fit, because I'd done that well. And that was a real confidence boost to me. I was getting picked to go and play sort of in the reserves, even though I wasn't playing. I was just sort of on the bench, not getting on, but I was going away with the reserves, like Stokes and Bradfords, and going away with first team players and just getting to see how they act in a changing room and sort of how the environment works. And, Mark Crosley was sort of the reserve team coach then, and just the way that he instructed the players was a lot different from sort of youth team football, where you sort of have to be not soft with them, but you can't get stuck into players as much, because obviously the young lads. But Mark Crosley was, if players weren't doing the jobs, especially first team players, he was really, really, really strict. And looking back, it was something that was really eye-opening to me. And I can remember ringing my dad on the way home from it was Stoke. We played Stoke away, and Tony Pulis was there watching their reserve team. And I didn't get on. I was just watching the game and on the bench. And I can remember ringing my dad saying, "It's, like I say, similar to sort of the Jack Lester situation. It's a whole different level. This is. It's completely different." And we sort of had a bit of a chat, and he was like, "Well, you can get there. You can do it. You can do this. You can do that." Trying to encourage me, but I was like, "Well, again, I need to really step it up. It's all right playing well in the youth team, but if I'm ever going to play in the reserves, it's, I need to change. I need to get better, loads better." And that sort of takes that season sort of to a close. Really, I was sort of in and around the reserve team at the end of the season. Like I say, I got Young Player of the Year, which was, brilliant. Got announced at one of the first team games and sort of came on the pitch. I got like a shirt and a trophy, which was brilliant. It's probably one of the proudest achievements, to be fair, at sort of my time at Chesterfield. And it was, it was really good, really enjoyed it. The second year sort of bit was absolute whirlwind. It was crazy. My second year, again, sort of taking my experience with the reserve team, knowing that I needed to get a lot better if I was ever going to make that team and get into the reserves. I went away that summer and worked harder than what I'd ever worked before. I was in the gym every day, like without missing a day. I was doing a run and I was doing weights every day. And I came back to pre-season the fittest I've ever been. I was the strongest I'd ever been. I was winning the bleep test. I was winning all the fitness tests with the youth team, and that sort of set me up then for a really good pre-season. And I was made captain of the youth team. And then sort of, like I say, that I had a really good, probably 10 games at the start of that season, like where I was playing. And I look back now, I was playing sort of the best I'd ever played before. It was ridiculous. And, looking back, it was like so consistent as well. And I was sort of getting in the reserve teams, playing against, seasoned professionals that had played, hundreds of league games, and I was holding my own and I was doing well. And that sort of led up to me being offered my contract in sort of the late October, early November of my second year as a YT.
So it was a 3-year contract, wasn't it? Which
I mean,
just unheard of, wasn't it? Really.
I can remember training one of the first times I trained with the first team, and Mark Richards said, he was just saying, having a chat, saying, "Oh mate, you're all right, what have you?" And he said, "Oh, you got a contract, haven't you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Oh, how long is it?" And me being sort of quite naive, I just went, "Oh, 3 years." And he went, 3 years? Oh, you're the most secure player at the club. And I was like, I probably should but I just didn't realise. I just said, "Oh yeah, it's 3 years." And I don't know whether it offended him or not, or I don't know, but it was, it was, like I say, I can remember my youth team coach, Dave Bentley, actually made the comment. He said it's unheard of for a player of this age to be offered such a lengthy contract. And I'm not sure what the situation was, but I know there were scouts coming to watch every game that we played, because they have to give, they had to, well, I don't know if it's still the same now, but they had to write for permission to come and watch the games. So for sort of the start of the season, there was at least 6 scouts coming to watch every single game. They didn't tell us who they were coming to watch. But obviously afterwards I got my contract. So from my perspective, they was coming to watch me. I don't know what clubs they were from or anything like that, but I think that was sort of the catalyst for me getting my contract. And yeah, it was, like I say, the rest of that year was just an absolute whirlwind year for me. It was brilliant.
How do you go from kind of having, like you said, a bit of imposter syndrome at the start, feeling, oh heck, I'm not cut out for this, to then being in that position where you're feeling more comfortable, and then you end up with a 3-year contract? What kind of changed in your mentality do you think, to get through that?
A lot of stuff for me is self-belief. And as a player, if I felt confident and I felt that I deserved to be on the pitch, and I knew that I'd worked hard enough to deserve a place on the pitch and stuff like that, I felt confident to sort of express myself. And I found that if I wasn't confident, I was worried about making mistakes. And if I was worried about making a mistake, it would often lead to me making a mistake. And I sort of tried to sort of understand my own mental process going into games. And a lot of the time it was, I found that when I played badly, I was reflecting on negative stuff that had happened in the past in previous games, whether it be giving a penalty away, or misplacing a pass, or losing some headers. And I was reflecting more on the negative side of things. Whereas I feel like when I was having that run of games where it was consistently very, very good, and I was playing very, very good, I had nothing else to reflect on other than my brilliant performance from the previous game. A lot of it was mental. It was the mental side of the game, and getting into that run of fixtures that I had leading up to me getting my contract, where I thought, right, I've done all the work possible here. I'm as strong as I can be. I'm as fit as I can be. Like, I can deal with this. I'm confident I can deal with this. That confidence just turned me into a different player and a different person at times, because I was, naturally I'm quite introverted. Whereas looking back, sort of in the second year of my youth team, obviously being made captain, and I captained the reserves on a few occasions when first team players were playing, I was quite an extrovert. And again, that's probably a confidence thing that I've sort of reflected on, and it's something that I've sort of learned to deal with as I've got a bit older. But as a younger player and a younger person, I found that I would vary from being an extrovert when I'm confident, and then if something bad happened on the pitch, or if I'd had a bad training session, I would quickly change to an introvert and just try and protect myself, and not want to sort of be around the pitch and be around players, and just want to protect myself, get off, and that be that. So yeah, it was, like I say, really interesting time.
Because at the start of that, so the 12-13 season, so your kind of second season with us, that's when we were in League Two again, and John Sheridan got sacked, didn't he? And Tommy Wright took over for a little bit, and then Paul Cook came in. So it must have been strange when you're, kind of getting those plaudits and things coming along, and then everything changes in terms of management. It must be a bit strange.
Yeah, it was strange looking back. It was difficult for me, because I'd worked up a relationship with not so much John Sheridan because he was sort of a bit standoffish, but more Tommy Wright. I worked up a good relationship with him and Mark Crosley, and I felt that I'd proved myself to them. I was training with the first team every day, and I was training well. Like I said, I was being taken to away matches. I was on the bench numerous times, and I felt that I'd sort of they got to grips with me, and I'd, like I say, proved myself to them, and I was on the right path. And then obviously with John Sheridan being sacked and Paul Cook coming in, it was like starting fresh. And I can remember the first few weeks of Paul Cook coming in, I didn't train with the first team. I was back training with the youth team, which to me was like, I didn't know if I'd done something wrong or what. I was just like, well, okay, I'll just go with it. And then I can't really remember what happened, to be fair, but I was ended up on the bench for the FA Cup, the Hartlepool game.
I was say, because I think you were on the bench for a game before then as well, were you? Was it Aldershot? I think.
Yeah, that was the first time I went away, Aldershot away. I think it was Sam Hurd. Sam Hurd wasn't available for some reason, so obviously they needed a centre half, which led to me being taken away, and I was on the bench. I roomed with Scott Bowden, but I can remember again being so nervous. And this is before I'd got my contract. This is whilst I was still a youth team player, so I hadn't trained with the first team at this point, and it was just a case of, I can remember as the youth team, we were training next to the first team, and Tommy Wright came over and was speaking to our youth team manager, and I think basically what he said is, we need centre half, who should we take? And our youth team manager said me, and that's it. I've gone with the first team down to Aldershot. I had to drive home quickly, get my training kit, my tracksuit and what have you, and I was straight on the bus down to Aldershot. But yeah, that was, again, brilliant experience. My dad, when I rang my dad whilst I was on the way down to Aldershot, because I've not had time to tell him, and my dad drove down to Aldershot, stayed overnight down there in a hotel and came to the game. It was, yeah, a really proud moment. I can remember warming up, and Shinner said to me, what are you going to do if you come on? You feel confident? And I can remember thinking, no, I do not want to come on. I'm so scared. But I just went, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'll do all right. But I can remember in the back of my mind thinking, I hope none at centre half go down injured or anyone gets sent off, because I'm so scared.
It must be really weird then, because all of those players have obviously got relationships and things in the first team. So do you feel like a bit like you're in the playground and there's all these different groups of people talking? It must be really odd.
Yeah, I get what you mean, but to be fair, there was some big personalities. I think we had Neil Trotman, players, Mark Allett, like I say, Craig Clay, Tendai Derek, who were quite young, and like I say, Scott Bowden at the time. So they were quite good, really. They made me feel welcome. When we was at the hotel, we had dinner and stuff. They let come sit with us and stuff like that. So it was really good. There weren't any cliques or anything like that I was aware of at that time. And although the team weren't performing too well on the pitch, like I say, the atmosphere in the dressing room was quite good. Obviously, you had players like Tommy Lee, who sort of led the changing room, brilliantly, and sort of big vocal point in the changing room. And I can remember, you know what? I can't even remember what the score was at the Aldershot game, but I know they won. Yeah, but all I can remember is from that day is having to run at the end with the substitutes that didn't come on. So we did some running with Shinner at the end, and I was that exhausted from sort of the anxiety of thinking that I'm going to have to come on. And I can remember just doing the running and being like, I literally can't breathe. So I think the anxiety of traveling down, being scared that I'm going to, not fit in and not do, what I say, you say it's like a playground, isn't it? If there's cliques and stuff, are you going to be accepted and what have you? And, I was really, really worried that I was going to come on, like I say. It sounds bad saying it now, but I was just so frightened that I was going to, especially when, obviously, I can remember that they were winning. I can remember thinking, if I come on now and they concede a goal, it's just going to be a disaster, and everyone will hate me and stuff like that. So it was just an absolute nightmare.
It was a good old-fashioned goal fest as League Two Chesterfield hosted managerless Hartlepool at the Proact Stadium.
First in on the act was Scott Bowden, who blasted in for 1-0 on 16 minutes. And on the half hour, they made it 2 as Mark Randall finished neatly from inside the area. 2 became 3 just before half-time as some suicidal defending from the monkey hangers allowed Craig Clay far too much space. 3-0, and the Spyrites enjoying themselves. On 54 minutes, it was 4. Danny Whittaker's free kick turned in by Tyrell Forbes. But Hartlepool finally got themselves on the score sheet with 12 minutes left via this Anthony Sweeney header. It was scant consolation, though, as just 60 seconds later, Jack Lester found himself clean through and made no mistake with the finish. And the humiliation was complete for the side bottom of League One in injury time as Craig Westcar capitalised onto yet more poor defending to finish from close range. 6-1 it ended, Chesterfield into round 2.
And then, like you said, you touched on the Hartlepool. So that was the FA Cup, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it was Chesterfield's biggest FA Cup win. I don't know if it still is, but it was 6-1 versus Hartlepool.
Yeah, that's probably why I thought he could put me on, because they were 6-1 up. But it was, like I say, I'd not really spoke to Paul Cook much before that. I probably said hello, like, hello Gaffer, you're right Gaffer, that sort of thing. But yeah, it was strange. Like I felt like I was on the bench to make numbers up. Like there was nothing in it really. I was just there to make numbers up, and I think they had a few injuries at the time. And like I say, they're probably prioritising the league at that stage, so resting a few players and what have you in the FA Cup. But it was obviously really good performance. And yeah, we've sort of, I don't even know, 10 minutes to go maybe. Just got the shot to go and get warmed up, and it was probably a bit of like a publicity stunt for Paul Cook to say that, look, I'm showing the youth that they've got a chance to come through and what have you. But yeah, really grateful for that, and it's something that I'll remember forever. And like I say, it's a very proud moment. Obviously, my dad and my nan and granddad were both there to watch. So yeah, it was a really proud moment for me, and sort of my FA Cup debut in the first round proper. It was brilliant. Yeah.
So the 13-14 season, which is when we won League Two,
yeah,
you spent a big chunk of that out on loan, didn't you? I think you had a couple of separate loans. You had a spell in the middle, I think, where you were back at Chesterfield for a while, and I think you got on the bench again. But you went out and had a few loans, didn't you, that season?
Yeah, I went out and had a few loans. I mean, so the start of that year, I can remember the first day of pre-season, there was going to be no reserves. So there was no reserve team. And I think that was probably down to Paul Cook wanting a smaller squad where he could have players. So he brought in Gary Roberts, for example, who probably were earning a bit more money and maybe wanted a smaller squad so he could, afford those wages and what have you. I don't know. But the availability wasn't there for a reserve league. I mean, if you looked, there was probably only myself and Jacob Hazel that weren't in the squads on most Saturdays. So there was only 2 players really, and the rest would have been the youth team. So no reserve team. So I found myself sort of the opportunity to actually play a game of football quite limited. And, we played maybe 3 or 4 pre-season games, and it was quite evident that I wasn't going to be starting. I mean, quite rightly, I wasn't as good as the centre-halves at the time, and there was no way I should have been starting anyway. But like I say, if the reserves were still there, maybe I'd still have a chance to prove that I could play against, other players that were playing in reserves that had played, loads of league games, and I was sort of matching them. But like I say, it wasn't to be for whatever reason. There was no reserve league, or there was, but we weren't in it. But yeah, in terms of the loans, it got to a point where I was wanting to play football, and I went to Buxton for a month. Enjoyed it, did really well. Quite eye-opening in terms of non-league football. It was my first experience of non-league football. It was really rough and ready. I can remember one of my first games for Buxton, we played against Ilkeston, and they had a striker called Gary Ricketts, who I actually went on to play with him after I got released from Chesterfield. I went on to play with him. But a big guy, a big 6'5" striker, tough, massive physique, and I'm this 18-year-old lad who's used to the ball being on the floor and strikers trying to play around you and stuff. And all it was there was balls out wide, balls in the box, massive strikers. And it was really eye-opening. It was a different test to what I was used to. But after a month there, I felt pretty comfortable with it. And I came back after a month and I had a conversation with a few people at the club, Paul Cook included. And sort of the plan was to go in at a certain level in non-league and sort of work my way up. That's what I was told anyway. I was going to sort of work my way up through non-league. And so after the month at Buxton, I was assessing my options and they wanted me to go back for 3 months, Buxton did. So it was either wait around and not play football for a bit or go back and play football. So I went and played football at Buxton. Again, really enjoyed it. And came back around Christmas, maybe just before Christmas time. I can't really remember, but yeah, I came back and again, it was whether it was a case of still the first team were flying, I was never going to get in. They were beating everyone inside quite comfortably. And even when I think they'd lost a few games, but they were still battering teams. And it was quite evident that it was a pretty settled starting 11 and there was no room for me whatsoever, even on the bench. So in my mind, I'm sort of thinking, well, I need to get out on loan. And at the time, there was some sort of rule, don't know whether it's still in place now, where because I'd been on loan to Buxton on 2 separate occasions already, so I'd gone for the initial month and then for 3 months after that, I couldn't go back until March or something like that. That was the rule. So I ended up going on loan to Matlock instead, obviously because there was a different team. And again, really enjoyed it. And I stayed there until the end of the season. But yeah, it was, like I say, probably progressed me as a player because I was a lot more tough and in terms of sort of dealing with different attributes. A lot of, like I say, not a lot of the non-league players at that time were big physical players, and I sort of had to adapt my game a bit. But yeah, it was, like I say, that whole season I wasn't around the first team much really. I mean, I was obviously in training every day and stuff like that. But in terms of playing, I had understood that I was never going to play purely because of the players that they had in place at that time.
I've always wondered, really, is there like a sense of feeling a bit out of sight, out of mind when you go out on loan, and that, do you wonder how much the club are actually keeping tabs on you?
Yeah, definitely, because Paul Cook's first priority was getting Chesterfield promoted, and that's the main priority. And I completely understand that. They did come and watch a few of my games when I was out on loan. But a lot of the time I think they relied on reports back from the manager that I was playing for and stuff like that. So I mean, it was quite frustrating. I felt like I'd worked my way to a level, and that especially that first year that Paul Cook took charge for the full season, he got rid of a lot of the backroom staff that I'd developed relationships with. I think the only 2 members of staff that remained were Shinner and Jamie Hewitt, the physio. Youth team coaches when, first team coaches when. We should understand because he wanted to bring his own team in. But like John Dungworth, who I'd worked very closely with, who had taken charge of multiple reserve games, who I had a really good relationship with, had gone. So you're looking at it now as a different club, really. I mean, all my friends had been released, so I was the only one to get a contract. So essentially, it was only me and Jacob Hazel who sort of the younger players, if you like. In the first 6 months of that year, Jacob was sent on loan to Norway, I think, or something like that. So Jacob wasn't there. So looking back, I didn't know anyone. It was pretty much like a new club. Although I'd been around the first team, it was pretty much, still on, I wasn't very comfortable around them. I knew them enough to say hello and what have you, but it was still, I'm a bit of, like, I'm the young lad here. I need to know my place and speak when spoken to, sort of thing. And it was quite crazy that time. And if I often ask myself, would it be different if the reserves if they were still a reserve team, I think it probably would have been, because they'd have been forced to watch me play football. They'd have been, at games, and I'd have been playing against better opposition and proving myself against better opposition, and that probably would have gone in my favour. But like I say, it's you can't question the importance of Paul Cook's job, which was to get Chesterfield into League One. And he assembled a squad that's probably the best squad that Chesterfield have had in recent memory. And just unfortunate for me that I was there at the same time and couldn't get a game.
Interestingly, you in the 2014-15 season, which was when we got into the playoffs in League One, you actually did end up coming on, didn't you, against Port Vale when Ian Evatt was sent off?
Yeah. I mean, I can't remember what during that stage, but I'd sort of won Paul Cook round a bit, and I was training well, and he pulled me in his office and said that I was training well, and he was happy with me, and I'd had a loan spell out somewhere, and I'd done really well. So that sort of got me in favour a bit, and I got in a few squads, and I'd not been in squads for like 6 months, so it was quite pleasing that I was actually getting somewhere. And it just so happened that game against Port Vale that Ian Evatt got sent off, and I was the only centre half on the bench, and so they threw me on. I can remember again, sort of, I went back to sort of the Aldershot game where I was like that nervous. Like I felt a bit like, obviously because I'd not been as involved, and I felt like a bit of an imposter. And it was like, oh my God, I'm so nervous here. And I was that nervous. I just ran onto, I got my shirt on and just ran onto the pitch. I didn't even wait for Evatt to get all the way off the pitch. And I can remember being sat in the changing room after, and the lads were like, you just ran on the pitch, didn't you? You're supposed to wait. And I was like, I can't remember. I just remember running on the pitch. So it was a bit of a strange one, but that was a tough game, the Port Vale game. I can remember it was Tom Pope that I was marking, and the gaffer said to me before I went on, he was like, do not let him head the ball, because if he gets a header in sort of our 6-yard box, he's going to score. He's obviously a very prolific goal scorer, and big, strong bloke. But yeah, sort of however long it was, did pretty well, put some tackles in, and that was, and we got the result in the end. That game was actually, I don't know if you were there or what, but there was some trouble, and it all kicked off after the game. I think there was sort of a racist incident, and we had Armand who was very upset, quite rightly. I think, and there's quite a lot of trouble after the game, and that sort of, after that, it was like a band. It was more like, right, we're a team now. Like, we've dealt with that and we've gone out. And after that, I sort of felt a bit more part of it. Sort of, I proved that I can deal with situations where I'm thrown in at the deep end and what have you. And so, yeah, I felt a bit more part of it then. And
what was the dressing room like then after that Port Vale game? Because I'm guessing you didn't really have a normal, like, post-match team talk with all that stuff that had gone on.
To be fair, it probably took us about half an hour to get back in the changing room, because it was crazy. Everyone was kicking off. Armand, we had to try and stop Armand going into the stand because he was hell-bent on going into the stand after one of their supporters. And from what their supporter was doing, I honestly can't blame him. Part of me was just like, right, go on then. You go and do what you need to do. But obviously that's not the right thing to do. But yeah, it was really heated. You could sort of feel the atmosphere in the change room. Armand was visibly upset, and as a teammate, we were all upset, and it was quite very disappointing. I mean, I like to think that I've not lived a sheltered background, so I've obviously grew up in Mansfield, which isn't sort of quite an affluent place, but I'd never experienced anything on that level before, and it was upsetting for me. So obviously with Armand, who's maybe has dealt with stuff like that in the past as well, and obviously we've got other players that have dealt with similar situations, and you could see sort of the emotion on the player's face. And Paul Cook really dealt with that well after the game, because he sort of consolidated us all as a team, and he was like, it's us against the world sort of thing. And it was that sort of mentality that everyone wants us to fail, everyone wants to beat us, we're the team to beat, and it sort of built all the players up together and created a really strong bond with the team.
Yeah. And then, like you mentioned, so you had your full debut then next match, which was Eventful again. So it was a trophy match, wasn't it, away at Scunthorpe?
Yeah, it was trophy match. And you know what? Reflecting back on that match, I was nowhere near fit enough. I'd not been playing football. I don't think I'd been out on loan yet at that stage. So I'd not played much football. Like I say, there was quite a lot of young players playing in that game. But I felt, obviously I got sent off, but I felt like I didn't do myself any wrong in that game. You know, Paul Cook spoke to me after the game, said did well. I can remember when I got sent off, and I thought, he's gonna tear me a new one here. He's gonna really get stuck into me. But he just gave me a bit of a cuddle as I was walking off the pitch. You know, some of the Scunthorpe fans were giving me some abuse, and he turned around and gave them some abuse back, which I was like grateful for.
Got to say, I've just before we started talking, I was watching the highlights of that match, and like they were both really quite innocuous yellows. They're like both on the halfway line, and really soft.
If I remember rightly, I think the second one probably was a yellow card. The one that I got sent off for was a yellow card because, like I say, I was defending, although I was quite high on the halfway line. I was probably the last man. So if he'd have gone past me, he would have been through on goal. Whereas sort of the first one, if I remember, it was just a bit of a late tackle, but I'd not gone in with my studs up or anything like that, and it was my first tackle. So normally you get that one free, don't you? So I can remember thinking at half time that I'd been booked. I needed to be careful, but it was, I don't think it was a sending off. And like I say, it was something that sort of not ruined the occasion, but I'll always look back on that occasion fondly. Other than that point, like I said, I thought that I'd done all right in that game. I played against some experienced strikers in Gary McSheffrey and Paddy Madden, who were seasoned veterans at that level. Even then, they were, you know, really, really sharp, really, really quick. And sort of you're looking at now, I think Paddy Madden's still playing, but obviously Gary McSheffrey's retired. And at that point, you're looking at those players and you're expecting them to win the game, sort of the side that we set up compared to theirs. But yeah, I felt like I didn't do myself any harm. I dealt with a lot of the threats they posed, and Paul Cook sort of reiterated that fact to me sort of when we had a chat one-on-one, and I felt quite positive after that game, to be fair.
It would have been another hard season to get on the pitch because we were just doing so well in League One and everything at that time. And then I suppose, was it not then that much of a surprise when you got released at the end of that season? Or?
No, to be fair, it was, I put a lot of stuff into place in preparation for me being released, because I was never going to get into that team. I just have to be honest with that. You look at the players in that team, especially the ones in my position. You had Ian Evatt, Liam Cooper. Obviously, we all know what Coops has gone on to do, and he's had a fantastic career. And Ian Evatt, although he's coming to the end of his career, was still an absolutely brilliant player, probably the best centre-half in that league. And then you had Sam Hurd as well, who was brought to the club as club captain by John Sheridan, who had played, you know, over 300 or 400 games in non-league at the point that I was there. And you look at it, and then you had Matty Brown and Charlie Raglan as well, who were, you know, Matty Brown's gone on to have a fantastic career in non-league, and Charlie Raglan's still playing in the league. So it's one of them where you think, really, did you have any chance at all? Probably not. It was a fantastic squad that Paul Cook had assembled, and like I say, it was in my mind that, you know, I'd always looked after my education. I'd made sure that whilst the other lads were messing around at college and not taking it seriously, that I did take it seriously. I did an extended version of the apprenticeship that was necessary, and I knew that I had a very good backing in terms of my parents as well, who'd always encouraged my education. And, you know, my dad nearly didn't let me join the youth team because I weren't allowed to do A levels. So he was, you know, on the education front, really, really really positive. And like I say, I'd applied for university. I'd already applied for university by the time I was released. That's how sure I was that I was going to be leaving. It was a case of being called into the office one day, and it was actually, they did it with me and Charlie Dawes, who was there as well, who's, you know, since we've both been at Chesterfield. We've remained friends and we've played together in non-league on numerous occasions. And actually sat us both down at the same time and just said, "Look, you're both young lads. You've got a lot of years ahead of you in terms of playing football. It's just at this time, your future's not at this football club." They actually said to me that we've had a few teams interested in taking you on trial. If you want us to get in touch, we can do that. And I sort of said at the time I had an agent. I was just like, I'll have a chat with my agent and see what I can sort out. And it was, and that was it. And they said, "Look, you're free. You're welcome to train till the end of the season. If you want, you can come in and train. And at the end of the season, there's not going to be a contract renewal there for you. That's it." And I sort of took it upon myself to just think, well, there's probably a few months left of the season. I need to sort out what I'm going to do after this year. And, I just took it upon myself to sort of take myself away and just leave. And I felt like if I stuck around the club any longer, it'd be, I wouldn't want to be poisonous. I wouldn't want my sort of, obviously I'm going to be upset I've been released. I wouldn't want to upset the positivity in the group. And, it was that sort of feeling that I just thought it's probably best if I just go, to be fair. And that was it. I can remember walking out the door and taking all my kit and just being like, right, that's it, done. And I went home and had a chat with my mum, chat with my dad, and had probably a few weeks to soak in before my mum said, "Right, well, you're not sitting around sulking, you need to go and sort yourself out." And like I said, I'd applied for university. I'd applied for a few jobs as well at this time, and fortunately got a job, and that was it. It was the case of sitting down with my agent, David Reeves, at the time, and we had a few offers to go on trial in Scotland and stuff like that, and that was something that I was willing to pursue and what have you. But like I say, I'd been accepted into university, and realistically would, moving up to Scotland, maybe get a 6-month contract, and then have to, say if I got released after that 6 months contract, would I then have to go wait another year before I could apply for university again? And I just thought, honestly, it'd just be best to play sort of non-league football part-time and then do my studies and get my education under my belt to the point that, that side of things can, I'll always have that under my belt, sort of my degree, and I can look at sort of maybe at that point looking to get back into professional football after I'd done my degree. And came close a few times, but you never really materialised, to be honest.
So you did a degree in sport education and special and inclusive education. Is that what it was?
Yeah. It was, so essentially it was 2 degrees in one, and it was something that at the time I thought, well, if I've got a degree in 2 different subjects, it would be sort of advantageous when I'm looking to apply for jobs. Obviously, you've got more stuff to work with and more experience, and it was really good. Really enjoyed my time at university. Got my degree, and never looked back. Really, it was brilliant, and I was able to play football in non-league to quite a high standard throughout that time. I played for when I first got released, I went to Mickleover with Glenn Kirkwood and Craig Hopkins, and really enjoyed my time there.
You've been to a few, haven't you? So I wondered if we get a few words on each of your clubs, because obviously sometimes when Chesterfield are not playing, fans like to go and visit a non-league ground, and there's some brilliant ones out there. And like you've said earlier, it's proper full throttle football, isn't it? Yeah. So you've been to places like Boston, Grantham, Pontefract, Worksop. A few mentions of clubs that you've really liked playing with, and clubs where you think fans would get a really good match day experience.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to say sort of Mickleover first and foremost were brilliant for me in terms of the chairman as well, were brilliant. Then from Mickleover, I went to Boston. So I actually went with Adam Murray, who was the ex-Mansfield manager. Mm-hmm. He was the manager at Boston at the time. And when I was at Mickleover, we played Mansfield in pre-season. I had a really good game, and we beat them in pre-season. They took quite a strong team. And obviously being from Mansfield, I knew quite a few people who were involved with the first team, and I sort of heard whispers that they wanted to sign me. So I was potentially on the verge of signing for Mansfield. But that move never came into fruition. And but But again, when Adam Murray left Mansfield and took charge of Boston, he took me to Boston instead. But like I say, there's loads of very good teams in non-league, but Boston's sort of the highest that I've played in terms of level, and it's also the closest to getting back to professional club. It's really ran very, very good, very, very well. The chairman is brilliant. They've just built a new ground. Jordan Burrows is there at the minute, I think, who's ex-Chesterfield, who's had a brilliant non-league career. And so, yeah, Boston's got, in sort of 5 6 years' time, they want to be in the league, and that's sort of, they've got everything in place at the minute to do that. And, it's a bit of a strange one because it's so far away from anything really. It's just in the middle of nowhere, Boston, and it's, Lincoln's probably its closest competitor. So it's, if they get that going, it'll be massive because they've got a massive fan base. In terms of other clubs, Worksop that I'm at now, arguably the best manager that I've played for in non-league is, the manager now, Craig Parry, who's, is in terms of man managing the best that I've worked with. We've got a fantastic chairman under Pete Whitehead, who's absolutely brilliant. He does everything for the club. He's down at the club all times of day, every day of the week. We've got fantastic volunteers down there. We've got a massive, again, for the size of the club, the size of the town. It's only a small town, Worksop, but it's got a massive fan base and lots and lots of people who, if you walk around Worksop, they treat you as sort of like this celebrity, really, because you play for the first team. It's like playing for a Step 4 non-league club, and all these people, you're walking around the town like, "Oh, Jack, you're all right," and it's, it's weird in a way because you never really got that at Chesterfield. So it's Worksop's a fantastic club, and like I say, at the minute we're doing all right. I think we're 5th or 6th in the league. Bit of a shaky start, but hopefully we'll be up there or thereabouts at the end of the season.
And you're kind of working on the pitch and off the pitch, aren't you?
Yeah. I work full time at Worksop at the minute in the academy. So I'm doing. I'm a football development officer. So I oversee sort of the academy alongside Laurie Griffin, who's the academy director, and I sort of oversee other football development. So we're looking at going into schools. Potentially trying to run like after school clubs and stuff, just so we can then sort of create partnerships within the local community and get children from those schools who maybe don't have access to football through various reasons, and get them down to the football club and show them what we can offer. And it's running really, really well at the minute. We've got, a fantastic academy that's playing. We play against professional teams. So this Saturday we had a tournament with our under 8s and 9s against Sheffield United and Lincoln. We've played Sunderland, we've played Derby's, Forest. It's brilliant. We get to play against all the professional clubs, and we've got some great contacts, and it's really useful. It's sort of my first step into football full time. I've done various jobs before that, and it's, you go to work every day and you absolutely love it. So what else can you ask for? And then obviously you're playing for the first team as well. So Worksop through and through at the minute.
Yeah, and you've still got like half your career left, haven't you, on the pitch?
Yeah.
What are you, 27?
27, just 27.
You've got another 10 years yet, haven't you, playing?
Oh, I don't know about that. They've got I've got some bad knees and a bad back with being so tall. So we don't know about another 10 years, maybe another 5 or 6, maybe if I'm lucky. But yeah, it's it's football, something that I want to be in all my life. Even when I finish playing, I want to sort of progress into the next to the managerial positions if possible. And, I want to go into, coaching in academies and stuff, that, although that I'm doing that now, to be somewhere, where it's maybe doing a youth team or something like that, running someone's youth team, that'd be fantastic. And, where that takes you, you never know. Like I say, I'm doing my coaching badges now, and obviously all the experience that I've got since I've left Chesterfield has sort of built me up to this moment. So yeah, very positive about it.
And final couple of things. So you've mentioned a couple of times Jacob Hazel, and I've seen that he's scored. He just scores a shed loads of goals, doesn't he? Like, I wondered if you'd ever come up against him You must have.
I have. I've played against him a few times, to be fair. Where me and Jacob had quite a good relationship, a bit of a love-hate relationship, to be fair, when I was in the youth team. And, different banter that gets thrown about. And he was sort of seen as like because he himself had a really good apprenticeship in his first year. He scored like over 20 goals in his first year. So he was sort of like the big dog of the dressing room. Well, he likes to think that anyway. And, he's, like I say, he's another one who's had a great career, and wherever he's gone, he's just scored goals, and that's what he prides himself on. We used to take the mick out of him in the youth team because, we used to say, all you do is just score goals. He was like, yeah, but that's what strikers do, just score goals. And it's something that he's carried with him wherever he's gone. He's playing at Whitby now, and by all accounts, he's playing very well. I think they're doing quite well in the league too. So, he's a mate that you often come across in football. Players, the age that I am now, and the amount of times that I've played in non-league, it's very rare that you play against someone where you don't know someone on the opposition. So it's, like I say, there's Jacob, and John Owafula still plays sort of relatively high level in non-league. Still speak to him quite often amongst other players. So it's good.
And final question. So you mentioned David Reeves used to be your agent. I had him on the podcast, and he was really funny. And obviously, lots of players talk about what he was like in the dressing room. I just wonder what he was like as an agent.
Yeah, he was brilliant. I mean, he'd always look out for me, and he was first and foremost, he was in my corner all the time. There were some clashes, I think, between himself and Paul Cook, but I don't really know too much about them. I was sort of kept out of the loop. But it's Reeves, was brilliant. He was sort of my youth team manager, Dave Bentley, who was sort of like my second dad really at that time. He, when it was sort of coming to fruition that I was going to get my contract, and that there was teams interested in me, sort of pulled me aside and said, look, I'm going to put you in touch with someone because you need someone now to look after you. And he put me in touch with David Reeves, who from the get-go was brilliant. I think he was probably a bit disappointed in me at the end when I said, look, I'm not interested in pursuing full-time football at the minute. I just want to go to university and get my education. I think he was a bit disappointed. But like I say, that was my choice, and that was my preference at the time. And looking back, would I have done things differently? Maybe. But, you've got to live with the decision you've made. And obviously David was there to advise me, and he was brilliant throughout the time. He was like I say, always in my corner, always telling me that I need to be out playing football and stuff, which is 100% right. And he was, I've lost touch with him now, but I really appreciate all the stuff that he did for me at that time.
I'd love to see David Reeves and Paul Cook having an argument. How would it be?
I think two fiery Scousers. Yeah, it'd be a good one, that, wouldn't it?